Hello, everybody. My name is Dratnos. Welcome to episode 55 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm joined this week by Trell, as always.
What's up, everybody?
And Tettles as well.
Hello.
Hello. This week's topic is going to be a very serious one. We are going to talk about everything that has happened in the past week surrounding Method, other individuals in the WoW community. We're also then going to go on to cover some of the broader problems that exist in this community, and that is World of Warcraft, but also just video games in general. And those are things that I think all three of us have seen for long periods of time and have existed here for long periods of time. And there's been a lot of silence surrounding them for long periods of time. We think these are really important to discuss. However, we are going to be discussing some very sensitive topics. Take this as a trigger warning. Stuff up to, rape will be discussed here. So, if you need to leave and not catch the show next week, we're going to come back with game-related stuff we're planning. Yeah, I guess it really does depend a little bit on what happens over the next week. That is the plan for right now. So, yeah, that's going to be our show this week. That's going to be our main topic. I guess before we get started, I don't know, Tettles or Trells, do you guys have anything to add to the preamble there?
I think all three of us are just really sad to see all this unfolding, and we want to help in any way we can. If you're still feeling bad about it, even reach out to us if you feel like we can help. We have a voice in the community. We can do something, so we're going to try.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that you'll notice about our show, right, is that we are three white dudes that are given a staggering amount of privilege in our society in general, but in this community in particular. And that is something that we have not done a good job of using to help people who don't have it. And all three of us are interested in doing that starting now. So if there is a way that we can help you out, if you're out there and you need that, I don't know, get in touch with, I think, any of the three of us or all three of us, and we will do that.
I guess it also should be stated the reason we don't have a guest is because we believe that this was too heavy hitting of a topic to put a guest in that position to speak on anything.
Yes. Yeah, we talked about this actually a great deal, about whether it would be appropriate to, try and bring somebody in here with, a perspective that would be valuable, but we didn't think that was the way to go, for that reason, right? We didn't want to put somebody in the position of being up here to speak for all members of a marginalized group. We thought that it would be better for us as hosts to, as the host of the show, to take a stance as a show.
I guess we can also tack this into the preamble. Basically, the Titanforge podcast, our Discord, just our community should be a safe space for all. And if you're having any problems with even us as hosts, anybody in the community, you're having any problems altogether, you can shoot us a message anytime, and we can do our best to help in any way that we can. And this is with anything. This can be video game related. This can be life related. We may not have the best perspective on everything, but we will try our best to help you.
Yeah.
Just saying, we have an awesome Discord. I can't even keep up with all the messages that go on in our Discord these days. I try to answer questions, but we have so many helpful people that cover those for us already. It's just a great community.
There is actually some really, really just surprisingly awesome conversation that happens in there, just all the time. So I'm really proud of actually the community that exists in there. So that is definitely a place to go. In addition, we are on Twitter at Titanforge WoW. We will continue to use our platform there in support of this cause and to promote our show as a primary thing that it does there as well. We also have a Patreon where normally every week we read people's names in some sort of silly way based on whatever they request or just their normal names. This week we're just going to be doing normal names because that seems appropriate. So Paul, Ahar, Anastasia, King of Skills, VTech XD, Zuko, Ja, Rescario, Okay, I guess there's not one associated with the next one. I see. Anyways, Heltari, Blue, Chromed, Seraphicus, Trekkie, the Marsh Hare, Regulus, Nevernude, Chewy, Nasumi, Gopher, Rude Dinosaur, Lufer, ZivXX, Delete Yourself, Sonara, Dazboot, Lickitius, Wendreddles, Genocidal, Necris, Revdil, Eru, Riley, Will, and Nevuk. May have missed some names in there. We usually have it formatted in a way where we read out all the fun names that you guys have picked there. So sorry if that happened to you this week. We'll return to the usual way next week. But thanks to all of you for supporting our show, and we appreciate that still and forever. Okay, into the main topic. Let's see. We have. So I guess I want to kind of start by talking about how we're going to talk about this. We have a long set of points that we're going to try and make sure we hit all of them. Then other than that, we're going to try and have it, be a open flowing conversation about these things. So I guess we should get started by putting out the introduction. So racism in specific, or sorry, not racism. Is this the one we don't? Racism, a bunch of other forms of discrimination, homophobia, transphobia, discrimination based on religion, discrimination based on social class, body shaming, more. These happen in gaming, and they are big problems throughout our community. Sexism is the topic that we're mostly going to focus on today. There's overlap between sexism and those other forms of discrimination that exists both in terms of the problems and the solutions. And we, as a podcast, are against all forms of discrimination and interested in being part of the solution on all forms of those things. So we're not going to actively try to ignore the other problems here, but this show is going to focus for the purposes of being concise and being topical with the stuff that is currently in the limelight here, the reckoning that is currently happening in the WoW community. So that's around sexism. That's what we're going to talk about today. Any omission of stuff that's going on in those other fronts, we are planning to act on those as well, and to be there for all of those things too. And our earlier stuff that we were talking about getting in touch with us applies to those things too. So
yes,
that's an important note.
And I think it also, just to expand, we are speaking on sexism, but this is most importantly like male to female sexism issues. There are like even male to male sexism issues, female to male sexism issues. It can happen with anybody. And again, like Dreadness is saying, feel more than free to reach out if you're having problems or need to talk to somebody.
Okay. With that being said, let's start by explaining the story of what has happened, because I imagine there are some percentage of our listeners who have been completely out of the loop on this. If you just listen to this show because you like to hear about the best way to attack a Taldazar every week, this might be something that you literally have never heard of. You might literally not know the names of top guilds in World of Warcraft, except for when you hear us talking about them. You might not know any of those things. And we are not going to provide as much of the story here as you can find out through research your own, but we're going to tell as much of it as we think is, necessary to have this conversation. So let's start by talking about Method. Method was the world first raiding guild for most of this expansion. They killed most of the bosses of the expansion first, with two exceptions, including the most recent boss. And they were an organization that expanded beyond that World of Warcraft raiding guild. They moved into other games. They moved into World of Warcraft content creation. I joined up with them as a World of Warcraft content creator. I was streaming under their banner with their ads. I created videos for them. I casted their events. So I was involved here as well. The biggest thing that has happened with Method, but by no means the only thing, revolves around Josh, who was a healer in their raid team for the past 2 years, and was involved in grooming underage women, and there's at least one very credible rape accusation against him, in addition to several very credible accusations of that grooming of underage women. that is the core thing that pretty much nobody, I think, at this point who has read all the information disputes that happened. And there, as far as I'm concerned, it is as sure as anything that he did this. And there is a lot of discussion about things that the reasonable people can disagree on in here. None of those things are whether or not Method Josh did this, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys. I'm sure you guys are with me on that one.
Yeah, you can speak for me on that one. I definitely.
Oh yeah.
I definitely agree.
There are lots of. Sorry, go ahead.
As I said, people end up saying that's innocent, but before proving guilty. But like realistically, that is a legal term, not a social contract that we end up signing with one another. And I think whenever there are just so many people who are making claims against Josh, I think it's more likely to be true.
I think there's there is a chance here that he will never see the inside of a prison cell or anything as a result of this as well. Like, I mean, the
international litigation across international borders is very challenging.
I'm by no means a lawyer or anything, but that's the thing, right? Is that it's the standard here is not the same as the standard to convict somebody, right? Like, in many cases, there is not actually going to be recourse available from the legal system, and us as a community, through like removing people from our community and removing organizations from our community, is often an important thing to do, even when somebody is not convicted or will not be convicted. And that is something that bad faith arguments all over Twitter will exploit people's belief in the justice system, believing in innocent until proven guilty, to make you think that you have to apply that to everywhere else as well, and you do not. That is not something that you have signed up on as being an American or being a member of a Western country or anything. Those are two different standards. So be wary of that argument if you see it floating around places, because that is important. Okay, so yeah, Josh did these things. That part nobody, I think, reasonably can disagree on. There is a lot of uncertainty surrounding who within Method knew what and when. That is the huge amount of question surrounding all of those things in particular. It is really not entirely clear what the answer to that is. It seems like nobody is entirely innocent here, but I don't think anybody knew the extent of this, with possible exceptions at the very top of upper management. That is unclear. So that is something that if you want to form an opinion on that, there's a lot to dig through to figure those things out. What Dress is basically trying to say is that there is a full systematic failure for those who were treated as poorly and who unfortunately had the run-in with Josh in that manner. There was a systematic failure of protection that. Yes. So what is clear? Like there's a lot that is in doubt about like whether exactly they knew he was like a rapist, but they were sent accusations which ended up being true, believed it to be false, believed him when he told them it was false, or in some cases perhaps didn't believe him but didn't have the power in the organization to take action. Again, it's unclear which specific people knew what and when, and it looks like the majority of the people in the raiding guild did not know more than what Josh and management told them. Were not involved in in receiving the accusations and then silencing them. But that is something that Method as an organization did do, and that is why that organization is dead and will not be coming back ever. Okay. I think that for me, the biggest thing to take away from the Josh situation is to understand that the world that we are living in is populated by many very, very bad people, and you should not assume that the 100 or so people that you have, some kind of close relationship or some kind of employee relationship with or anything like that, you should not assume that group of people is devoid of such actors. And the fact that somebody is your friend, people are capable of behavior towards you that is different than the behavior they exhibit towards their victims. And Josh is a clear example of this, where he, had the guild convinced and was absolutely not what he told them and was what everybody else told them he was.
And in addition to that, the legal system failed all of those people as well. Josh's charges got dropped. And would you say that that's not fair for any of the victims that the charges got dropped? But again, it's another point of innocent until proven guilty is not a standard that always should be upheld as the ultimate cause of recourse.
The things that the Raiders heard, it's perhaps possible and defensible that the courses of action that they took. Although I don't think that many of them are continuing to defend them at this point. It depends. If you go look at it's tragic.
Oh, definitely not now.
Yeah.
Many of the method raiders are good people, and they feel horrible about not knowing or trusting him too much and just assuming he would change.
Yeah.
That's not to say they were in the right, but I think they're seeing the remorse now. They understand now.
Yeah. What is true is that Method as an organization was sent a lot of stuff about Josh that was systematically suppressed and systematically ignored beyond just that content. Okay. Method also had some other stuff going on beyond Josh. Sasha Steffens, co-CEO of Method, had 2 women come forward and say that he, the exact actions taken against them were perhaps murky, but Sasha Steffens was in a position of power over these women. Yes. When you are a employer and you have employees, when you are a guild master and you have guild followers even, whenever you're in any of those sorts of relationships, consent is something that becomes murky, and your power over somebody to put them in a position where they feel like they can't say no is something that you need to be extremely careful of. I do not believe so that is if you are out there and you are somebody who would act in good faith here and just is thinking, why can't, this is just a case of somebody who failed to, failed to do a good job of knowing whether or not somebody was into him back. I don't believe that's what happened in this case, but that is the important thing here, is that even if that's what's going on, that kind of behavior is often something that happens reasonably between 2 people when there is not that power dynamic. When that power dynamic is involved, it becomes not okay, and not okay to begin with.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that what Sasha did, while it may not be illegal, it is morally wrong, and he has a responsibility as the CEO of an organization to not put people in the positions where they feel like they can't say no. Mm-hmm. Especially whenever it comes to relationship stuff or dating or sex or anything else like that.
You just have to set extra boundaries when it's work related. If anything is business related as well as gaming related, you have to just assume it's a business and treat it like that. In the corporate world out there are tons of boundaries when you go on a trip with your boss. You just don't interact at night. You only interact during the day, basically, unless you go out for food, and then that's it. If you're going to be doing that in the World of Warcraft world as a business, you have to treat it the same way. I don't think a lot of people realize that. Even though this is a fantasy game, there are still real life aspects to it, and especially when you meet up in person, you have to treat it like you're in the real world.
And I mean, in addition to that, I think a lot of these people can and probably would be your friends as well, just beyond the scope of business. If you're working a job, I feel like sometimes you have friends inside of work that you'll do stuff outside of work on, but I feel like a lot of these guys, if they have employees, they're still friends with their employees, and that makes the boundaries a little bit more rough to gauge as to how to appropriately act. But like Charles saying, you really have to treat it like a business decision sometimes, as weird as that's going to sound.
The more that you are in kind of one of those potentially gray areas, the more enthusiastic. Okay, it's not just in this case. The bar you should always be setting for yourself is to secure enthusiastic consent before proceeding in any way with any of these things, right? That is something that you're looking for, is not just somebody not stopping you, somebody who wants you to do that, right? Who wants you to pursue them or wants you to do anything with them. So that is just something you should always do, and something you should always hold your friends accountable to doing as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Sasha was one of 3 people in Method that was right near the top of the organization. He was one of 2 co-CEOs, and it's it seems very likely that those two were perhaps the only people who had like hiring, firing power. There's a third member of Method's upper management, Derry, who was the general manager of Method. She has taken a lot of heat on Twitter, and there's a lot of awful vitriol being aimed her way, and that is not something that we endorse or believe you should do in pretty much any case ever, is send any hateful messages in any way to people. It's unclear if Derry had the ability to stop Josh from being retained by the guild. She has posted things taking responsibility for stuff here, and it's certainly if she has responsibility here, she's not the only one. It's a murky situation again with regards to if you're in an organization and you have a general manager role and you don't have the ability to stop something like this, that is a serious red flag, and the words general manager don't mean anything in that case, and you need to get out of that.
There have been a couple of people who are within the Method organization who have come out and stated explicitly that Derry was in these conversations with upper management and was trying to get Josh removed for a very long period of time and got stonewalled out basically out of the conversations.
Right, and that's the hard part, right? When you are the general manager of an organization, you also do bear responsibility for what it does, right? Like that is a title that implies control over these kinds of events, and that it makes it difficult, right? It means that you may end up being put in this position where you exhausted all your options and you're literally given two choices, right? Leave Method or be okay with this, right? Be either explicitly or implicitly okay with this, right? And as much as we can say to people that like, oh yeah, you should have left then, right? That is not an easy situation for somebody to be in at all, and it's not one that I think anybody can know exactly what they would choose in that spot unless they were put in it themselves as well.
That's a really hard decision, I think. If you put yourself in Derry's shoes, that's probably her dream job. She created that from scratch and she built that brand herself. It probably seems to her, and having being told that one of the raiders who is charged with these allegations was actually innocent, and then also going after him, I think is a good move. Like I would personally not blame Derry for this, but it's all a big gray area and people are pointing fingers and all that across the Method organization.
So here's like the fact that she tried to get him out of the organization, I think represents that that clearly was the right move, and it was clearly an important thing to do. And there's a saying that all it takes for evil to win is for good people to stand by. And it's possible that her options, everything that, the only way for her to stay employed was potentially just to stand by. But at the end of the day, that is what she chose. And that was the mistake here. It doesn't stop her from having been a good person, but it does mean that she was the reason that the evil succeeded here, right? That the evil went by being that good person who did nothing, right?
Yeah, that sentence, though, all it takes for evil to win is for good to stand by. I think that's the classic case in the online world. There's tons of good people out there, and usually they're shy people, and the people with bad intentions are usually more loud and outgoing and try to cover their actions a little bit. But if you know someone like that, try to take a stand a little bit and influence them for the better.
Yeah, it's very much not a clear-cut case, right? Like it is extremely difficult. There are extremely difficult decisions that needed to be made and weren't here, and that it's hard to place blame for those sorts of things, to say what exactly somebody should have done.
Okay, well, all we know that somebody should have done is the Sasha and Sko stuff. It is very clear that both of those two had many conversations, and there was a lot of evidence and accusations that were sent to them directly. They had a lot of open communication about the decisions that were being made with Josh, and ultimately all of the decisions end with them as the co-CEOs of Method Operations, and they decided that they were going to turn a blind eye to it and look the other way and hope that Josh was telling them the truth. And they failed themselves, they failed their raiders, they failed the organization, and they failed the WoW community, and they let people be manipulated and treated poorly under the name of method for such an incredibly long time that they are ultimately the ones who are responsible for all of the things that have gone wrong today. Like at the top is Josh's responsibility for all of these poor things that have gone wrong, and right below them it is Sasha and Sko for allowing it to happen for as long as it did.
I agree with that. Absolutely.
Yep, Tim.
Far below that, we have, well, down somewhere in there is me. I wore the tag method. You know, I was in the organization. Josh was in the organization. There was a Kotaku article that was out about it when I joined the organization. I hadn't read it. I don't know if having read it, if I had read it, if I would have changed my course of action. I don't know. I don't know what I would have done. I don't know if I would have found it credible or if I would have believed them when they said it wasn't. And certainly, you know, there's some due diligence that may have been impossible for me to do, but I will do in future with future organizations. There are a bunch of raiders who actively raided with Josh and who believed him. And that is not an easy place to be in either. There's a lot of blame that is going towards all the raiders for having played with him. And they were complicit in this. You know, they could have done better. They failed to do that. A lot of them are feeling very guilty about that. However, Josh is a sociopath. He was effective at manipulating many people. Many of his victims and his fellow raiders as well were manipulated by him and were deceived by him. And that is ultimately, again, the responsibility there lies with Josh, and it lies with the people who covered for him and enabled him, right, at the very top.
I would also like to extend a formal apology to Roger Brown, who I definitely overstepped the line that I am comfortable with. Whenever I said some things to him on Twitter under the assumption that he was actively doing something harmful. Like, under the light of this new lens, I think it's clear that, like Dratnus was saying, they were manipulated by a very effective sociopath. And while they are not completely blameless, I do not feel comfortable with the things that I said to Roger, and I just wanted to apologize.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you look at some of the clips from Flex, from Narcoles in the past 24 hours, it's clear that they're tremendously upset about how this has all went. Now, there's reasons for them to be upset professionally as well, right? Their guild has fallen apart. I don't know to what extent they're going to raid together as the core roster ever again. That's possible that that's something that'll happen, but certainly there's an upheaval here that is dramatically affecting something around which they built their entire lives. One of the things that you're going to see a lot of on Twitter is people saying that this is the biggest tragedy of this all. And it's easy to think about that, right? If you are somebody like us, you're, you know, just a white dude playing video games, it's very easy to empathize with the Method Raiders here, who are probably the most relatable people to you in this story, and to think about how awful this is going to be for them. I would urge you to remember that these are not the most seriously impacted victims of what has gone on here. I have a tweet here, one of a couple tweets that we'll be highlighting here that I think will do a better job than me of explaining this. So I'll just read this out rather than fumble around and try to paraphrase it. It's been so exhausting to read people's take on this week's events because I find that they identify with the accused and I identify with the victim. For them, it's a fear that they could one day be the accused. For me, it's a reality that I was once a victim. This week has been draining. I'm still so fucking disgusted, not only at the awful stories, but mainly at the responses I've read. I spend a lot of time in WoW Discord servers, and I'm so tired of reading these shitty fucking takes. I think it's a hard reality to realize that to some extent, we are all complicit in overlooking things in our friends. The people we surround ourselves with are a reflection of ourselves. We shouldn't accept behavior in them that we wouldn't accept for ourselves. We all have to make the choices we can in the places we can. It's a long process to get to where we should strive to be. I'm committed to making the changes we need in Skyholder Pieces. Okay, I don't want to keep saying that part because obviously that's not me. That's this person here at VelityX, involved with Skyholder Pieces. And this is a fantastic tweet that I think does an excellent job of explaining why of explaining something important that's going on here, and why I think that it is good to have empathy for the method raiders here, but make sure that you are not spending all of your energy here empathizing with them and not with the women that are, the bigger victims here.
Agreed. They've spent years in pain and therapy and recovering from this kind of thing. Honestly, it's a good thing that this happened to the community, that all this came to light. It's not a bad thing that method broke up. It's actually a good thing overall. It sucks for some of the good people in the organization, but it's good that the community is taking a stand now.
Right. It's better that this didn't continue just under the rug for another year or whatever, right? Like that. This upheaval is very important, and is, the pain that we're feeling now is a fraction of the pain that the real victims felt and continue to feel. That being said, it is still real pain, and it should not be, and it should not be treated like there's no pain from method raiders or anything. I just think it's important to remember the scale of these things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that sets the stage of what happened with method. There have also been some other allegations about other members of the WoW community as well. Final Boss TV, who is a content creator not affiliated with Method, although did cast events and stuff with them in the past. But this is somebody who had an event at a convention some amount of years ago with a guild where several of them were sleeping in the same room. And okay, one thing that I think we all need to talk about this that is not normal is it is not normal for a bunch of people to go and sleep in the same room and then have like multiple people to the same bed, especially if it's like two people of different genders. That's not something that if you have an opportunity to stop that, from happening in your own events going forward, you should try and do that, because that is not something that that's something that sometimes it does need to happen if you're depending on budgets and stuff, but in a lot of cases, the organizer or whatever of the room in that way, the person who has the power of the room, is somebody who wants to have that, who is going to be in that bed with the other person, right?
I mean, it happened with Sasha too.
Right.
There wasn't enough beds, and then it's like they're sleeping in a co-ed situation, and it just
right. This is Sasha, co-CEO of Method. So back to that one a little bit. Sasha, co-CEO of Method. There's an organization with a large amount of resources, can't put together the resources to bed or to host these two people in separate rooms, right? Like that clearly is not the case, right? This is a case of Sasha's power, being used to make it so that he gets to the opportunity to sleep in the same bed as somebody that he has power over. Now, it's unclear whether or not that dynamic existed here with Final Boss TV. I think there's a good chance that it did. I think there's a good chance that oh, look, it ended up that we sleep in the same bed together, But obviously, I don't know the full story.
Even if you're forced in that situation, if you're the person in power, go sleep on the couch. At least separate yourself in any way you can.
Yeah.
Right? If there's 15 people in the same room, maybe somebody else on the couch, or maybe everybody else is on the couch. But I don't know. If there's one person of a different gender than everybody else in the room, maybe let them find one of the many places in the room where one person is sleeping by themselves. That I think is an important goal to have here. But yeah, so what happened with the Final Boss TV situation is that they were in the same bed while he believed her to be asleep. He touched her on the genitals while he believed her to be asleep. If you read his twit longer defending himself here, he said that, he thought that there was something between the two of them, and he thought that they were going to need to deal with that in person. That it's there's I thought there was something between us, and this is something that we're going to need to sort out in person. And when you read those kinds of twit longers, it's very reasonable to put yourself in that person's shoes and be like, oh yeah, I could see myself thinking that somebody's into me and they're not actually into me. Man, that could happen to me. I don't want to be getting in trouble for that kind of stuff. And that is not the problem here. That is not the thing that happened that was the problem here. It is not a problem to think somebody's into you and to be wrong about that. It is a problem for your first move when you are trying to, just identify whether somebody's into you or get with them because you think they're into you. It's a problem for your first move to be touching them on the genitals while you think they're asleep. That is the problem here. Those are the issues. That is not the other stuff. I thought somebody's into me and they're not actually into me. That happens all the time, all around the world. It's awkward. It is not something that...
We're all gamers. We all get in that situation.
That is something that that is not the problem here, and there are bad faith takes on Twitter that are going to try and convince you that that is what everybody is witch hunting right now, and it is not that. So keep your watch out for that. There are arguments that are very convincing that will lure you in that say that, and it is not what happened.
Again, like Dratnus is saying, touching somebody, especially in inappropriate places, should never be your first move. Like, if you've had like a very clear conversation about it, you know what? Do whatever the hell you want. But like, if your first move, especially while they're fucking asleep, like that is astonishing to me, is touching them on their genitals, get the fuck out of here. Like, no, it is not okay.
I think the point is there are just like a million points in time before that the person in question could have stopped and realized I shouldn't be doing this, or I shouldn't be in this situation at all. And you just need to identify that early. And if you don't identify early, identify at the next point in time where you see the next red flag, like sharing a room together.
Right, because again, you are attempting to secure enthusiastic consent here. That is what you're going for. You're not trying to like get in a spot where you go on a maybe, right? You're not trying to run a yellow light here. This is a green light only type thing. That is what you should be aiming for, because if you really think about it, why are you trying to get with somebody that is not a green light, right? Like, why is that something that should not be something that you should be okay with from yourself or from anybody that you associate with? Okay, next.
Yeah, no means no.
That's the lesson from the Final Boss TV case. Next case is something that we actually don't know a lot about, and so we won't talk as much about. This one is surrounding Swiftie. There have been a couple of twitlongers about that one. We know a lot about the other cases here because they were, Race to World First commentators, Race to World First competitors, and we are those things too, right? Tettles and I are Race to World First commentators. Trell's involved in the high-end WoW PvE community. The Swiftie case is not a such case where we actually know much of anything about what's going on here beyond what is publicly available on Twitter. So for that reason, we're going to leave this one for here. We're going to acknowledge that it's out there and you should go find out what is happening with it. But we don't feel educated enough on this one to be out here making it into part of our points for today.
Yeah, do your own research, come up with your own conclusions. Again, we don't know enough.
Okay, final one here that is on this list comes from Complexity Limit. Actually, I should go get this tweet up. So let me go find it.
While he's doing that, basically, there were accusations and there were posted screenshots of one of the members of the raid team, Willie B, that were, I don't even know how to describe this. I don't know. There was a very toxic relationship that was had.
Not just one, right? There was a pattern of behavior between him and ex-girlfriends that was, at the very least, borderline, and it looks to me like actually physically abusive. Limit was informed of this yesterday when they made a post just about this thing in general, and somebody was like, you should clean your own house, or multiple people actually replied in a way that brought this to their attention. Today, they tweeted, or I guess not today, sorry, this was yesterday at this point. I haven't slept. They tweeted, "We've been made aware of alleged misconduct involving a member of our guild. We take accusations against our members very seriously, and following an internal investigation, we've terminated our relationship with the player in question." And then they post a very important thing here that we, I think, posted in our Discord as well, just verbatim. "If you feel you've been a victim of a crime, we urge you to report it to local law enforcement." And then there's a good list of resources for education and support, which we endorse this message as well.
I copy pasted it straight into our welcome channel. Feel more than free to go check that out. In there. So
there are a lot of people in the comments of this that are equating what has happened in Complexity Limit to what has happened in Method. A cynical take of things is that, Complexity Limit realizes that they're going to get in trouble, here, and it's not by virtue of being a different guild, but by being the second guild are taking actions differently. I personally don't believe that cynical take, but it is out there. I believe instead that Complexity Limit is an organization with a different set of morals, a good set of morals, that is being driven here by a group of people that are on the right side of this, and they've taken a hard action very quickly. They immediately took this seriously and launched a serious investigation, as far as I've heard, very serious. and have taken this action. And that, I think, is not about. I think you're going to find people in the comments here saying that this makes them a bad guild for having had this happen. And I think that it is the exact opposite. That as a guild, making this kind of commitment and taking this action is the exact opposite of what Method did, and is commendable.
I think the important take here is that this is the first Complexity Limit has heard of these allegations, and they're immediately taking action and doing it the right way, which is what Method should have done a couple of years ago to a better extent.
Yeah, there's going to be a worry that people will post, and again, there will be bad faith takes that dramatically abuse this part because it's something that it sounds very reasonable about how you don't just want like one accusation to be able to be fired off falsely. But to my knowledge, this accusation has been investigated and found to be credible, and they've taken this action, and that is an important difference here. And that is something that, we're not just trying to create a world in which you can just go to somebody's Twitter page, somebody's guild's page, and just type "this person did such and such" and then get them lobbed from their guild or whatever. That's not what we're trying to create here. But that is not what happened here. So, and you will see people saying that is what happened here as well. So be on the lookout for those. Okay. So those are the cases in specific that have happened in the WoW community recently. Of course, there's a lot more to learn, and there may have been some that we've missed actually here with this as well. There are mega threads on the World of Warcraft Reddit, on other subreddits as well, that have these things, aggregated, and we have not intentionally omitted anything that we know about here, but it's very possible that there are things that we've missed, and things that will develop potentially in the coming days that are not currently in this episode, and so obviously won't be in here in the future. So go and learn more about those things. But from now, we're going to transition our show to, rather than a discussion of here's what's happened and here's our take on understanding what's happened and the lessons to be learned from that. Here's kind of the big lesson to be learned from that, and what we are going to do as both a podcast and as individuals and in the guilds that we are in and in any place that we can to take action here. So again, to start this off, I'm going to borrow from a tweet that I found that can do this more succinctly, much more eloquently than I'm capable of. So I will read that one out. This one's from @LG Flanagan. To the men of esports and gaming, misogyny is a pyramid, sexual assault is the peak, and the bottom is the behavior that has, in many spaces, been completely normalized. Sexist attitudes, shitty jokes, gross and off-color comments. Tolerance of this casual stuff can give way to more pervasive and more dangerous attitudes down the line before most people even realize it. It can be really uncomfortable, but vocalizing objection earlier and more often is how we truly transform the culture. And then there are some clarifications here. I'll read the first one. A lot of them are just responding to bad faith takes, so I don't want to necessarily go too much into that, but this one I think is valuable. So to clarify, in no way do I mean to imply all those who make jokes, etc., become abusers. What I meant is that the more cultural tolerance and acceptance there is for the stuff at the base, the easier it is for abusers to feel okay to climb up and commit the acts towards the top. And that is what has, kept me up here at night for the past couple days, is the fact that base of the pyramid, to the best of my knowledge, have never, taken these actions even at the base of the pyramid here, but I have certainly not let it be a deal breaker to play with people in the past. And, so I have been complicit in being a part of this community and not being vocally, wholeheartedly, and 100% against all of these things. And I don't think anybody really has. There are maybe some out here, but I'm not one of them who has been always on the right side, always standing up for this. 100%.
There's always more you could do. I think all three of us here are on the right pathway of always choosing the right thing, but there's always more we could do to stop the bad around us. Like I've been in situations many times in WoW where the guild I was in, there's some dude making off-color comments or sexist jokes, and I always say, hey, don't say that. But there's always more I could do. Like I could get myself out of that situation and not enable it further. And the more people that do that to some extent, and the more often they do it, will suppress those people and stop that behavior eventually. It just has to be a constant feeling around you? Like, is something going around me that I can stop or help affect in some way that's good for the community? And if so, then try to do that. Try to stop that stuff.
I think that one way to highlight, and perhaps if you're somebody who's like, oh, this is different, me doing this does not enable the actual assaults or rapes that have happened. Consider the Method Josh persona. Consider the persona under which he streamed, and consider the fact that it was not only celebrated, but highly profitable for him to basically just have a stream persona that was, a pretend fake version of exactly what he was.
Yeah, that caught me off guard the most. I thought it was like a fake. I thought it was just like an actor or like a fake take on things, because it's just like one of those things that there's no way that this could be real, right? There's no way that somebody is this sick that they would actually say these things and be legitimate. But no, everything he said was truthful to who he was as a person. And I think that was the most insane part for most people involved, is that he was true to himself.
Right. So if you consider instead a universe where that behavior was not rewarded with thousands of, dollars of income per month and viewers per stream, and you consider one where instead that was shut down, that was shunned, he was told, in every guild that he started in, not just Method, but all the ones on the way up, that in order to be in those guilds, that was not, tolerated behavior. Imagine that is something that, it's possible that in the Josh case in particular, that is not a redeemable soul, but there are others who are, that could be brought over to the right side here if we change the environment all around the community to not allow this.
I was always skeptical of his persona, and I always wondered, like, he could really be like that and not just be that way on Twitch. And I think many other people probably had that same thought. And if everyone had questioned that and actually done something about it, these poor victims would have been able to come out immediately when it happened, because there'd be a big backup in the community for it. There'd be a lot of momentum in the community to take this guy down, pending that the things he did were actually the way he was. And I think everybody needs to be ready to do that next time it happens. If some person like that becomes big on Twitch, or has like a funny personality, or the things they do are like one of a kind, you got to really take a step back and think, like, maybe this is actually a really bad thing.
Our culture, our gaming culture in general, is entirely structured around men. That is something that, pervades our spaces, is that there's an overwhelming male dominance in this culture. When you see a lot of, the post about, for instance, the Method Raiders and the sympathy that's being felt for them, that's just like, hey, these are just guys that want to play video games. Consider all of the girls that just want to play video games that never got the chance to, because the structure of this community and the culture of this community has systematically excluded them and has told them this is not the place for them at every turn. As a man, especially as just, a white man, we have this ability to come home and sit back, relax, escape into amazing worlds where we don't have, cares or concerns. And that is something that is amazing. And we do not want to take that away, but women have been denied that forever in our system. And that has to stop.
It's just so sad, because for the longest time, there were top guilds that on their applications, they would just be they would have this huge disclaimer. It's no women are allowed. And for the longest time, everybody was just kind of okay with it, because that's how WoW was. But there was a pervasive belief that just women were not good at this game, right? Or they're good at games ever, right? And that's been everywhere, and that's been, even if you didn't believe it, you accepted that you were playing with people who did, right? And you accepted that you wouldn't play with a woman in your guild because it made the men play, be weird around her, right? And that was accepted. And that is, if you spoke out against that, you're branded as a white knight, as a simp, as whatever the term is at any given time. And that is not okay.
Yeah, we need to change that. I think I read one time on a guild description, it said, we do not allow women in this top 10 rating guild because they attract drama. And that was just So stupid. You're basically preventing women from joining your group because the people that you can't control in your group are going to be obsessed with them while they're there. The other solution you should do instead is get rid of those people that would have been obsessed with the poor women.
Right. Not get rid of as well, but like if you have a great raider on your team that can't control himself around women, that's an opportunity to be like, all right, dude, you know, what's the problem here? That why can you not be a normal person? You know, why can you not be decent to women? Because in a lot of cases, they're not irredeemably bad people. They're just people that have learned that it is okay to just be weird around women, or not be weird, but be abusive or harassing, or, you know,
bullying or anything. Like
any of those things. There are all kinds of behaviors that fall under this umbrella, and there are a lot of cases where there are people that we can just one of us calling it out or reaching out to you know, the guildie, the friend of ours that is guilty of that behavior, can be enough to make them realize and to make them stop and to turn them into a member of the good guys here. So that is a tragedy that it has not happened more, and there are some people that are probably not ever going to be saved on this, but there are a lot who can be, and all of us in all of our guilds, no matter whether you're world first or you know, US 8th like me, or whatever dumpster rank Tettles' guild is now.
Weird flex, Stratnos.
That is a weird flex.
we have to do this, right? We have to do this. No matter how far down the ladder you are, you know, that is it's important everywhere. Even if you're a 1 out of 12 normal guild like Tettles' guild, to do that. All right. Up next. This one's gotten a little heavy, but that's good.
You okay?
Yeah, up next. There are a lot of sexist terms out there that get used towards women, and as a part of this, terms like thought, whore, e-whore, slut, e-slut. Those are really, you know, the same thing, but with an e in front. E-girl as well. These are terms that, in some cases, especially in the case of e-girl, they're used harmlessly, and in fact used by women to describe themselves in a lot of cases. And in other cases, these terms cause, you know, have been used spitefully, have been used maliciously, have been used hatefully against women. When a term is used in that way, you inherit that connotation when you use that term. Even if you use a term such as e-girl, such as thought, where there are people, you know, who use those and who use them in ways that are not meant to be malicious, there will be women who read the fact that you're using those terms, who see that you're saying those things, and will read into them the way that it has been used to insult them as a dagger, you know, the way that it has been used as a dagger aimed directly at them, and will see that behavior in you as well. So if you are somebody who is not, you know, a member of, and this applies to, again, more than just the sexism thing, if you are somebody who is not a member of you know, a marginalized group or whatever, and you see members of that group saying to not use a certain term, it is literally so easy to not do it. There are a large amount of words in the English language. I was going to say millions, but I'm actually not sure if there are millions. That is a lot. Maybe there's not millions of words in the English language, but there are enough that your vocabulary is going to survive if whenever you're told that one of the words is something that causes people harm, to just stop using it. It's actually not that hard. And it's not like it's not like if you realize and try to stop saying a word and then mess up and say it a couple times, it's not like people are gonna, you know, crucify you for doing that. You're just like, oops, you know, I didn't mean to say that. Or even if you're just like, even if you don't say anything and you just internally you're like, oh, you know, I'm trying not to say that. It's actually, that's all that it takes to stop doing that. And there have been words I've removed from my vocabulary that way, none of the super bad ones, but this has happened in the past with words like, you know, retarded, for example, is one that is used as that was normalized for a very long time.
Retarded and gay, I used to use those more often than I am comfortable doing now. Now I've literally tried to cut them out of my vocabulary as much as possible, because the point in which you start using a word and it has such a overwhelmingly, extraordinarily negative connotation that it's going to hurt people's feelings, it is not a word that I would like to use. I will continue to be using the word fuck probably, though, a lot. But there are many other words that do not have an innately negative connotation that can be used instead.
Yeah, we're talking about the words that have the morally gray area involved. You know, people easily attach those words and just start saying them when their friends start saying them. Be the person that stops that chain of events and change your vocabulary.
Right.
I have some work to do too. I say e-girl sometimes, and I really should stop, honestly.
Yeah, that one is, I think, the most gray area one here, because it really is, there are people who self-describe as e-girl, and it's the thing is, though, that it's just not hard to stop using that kind of word.
People
right?
have overblown it though. They used it in such a negative. It's been used in such a negative connotation that now it's like in a gray area of like, is this person saying it spitefully, or is this person saying it as like a
Exactly,
joke,
yeah,
or as a way to describe somebody's profession?
Mm-hmm. And I think there are some terms like that in a gray area that are a little bit different than some of the other terms, which you should definitely just get away from. And they're not that funny is the thing as well. Like I'm willing to tolerate if something's really funny, that's something that for me is like, man, this is a shame that we're losing something really funny or whatever. But in this case, it's just their words. They're not inherently funny. They're not. You can be a funny person who uses these words and pretty easily transition to being a funny person who doesn't use those words, and it doesn't. Your humor is completely unaffected. So people use that defense, and I don't think it is valid.
And these are really small things we're talking about right now, but they do affect the bigger things. Like all this is that pyramid that Dranos was talking about earlier, where if you can stop the stuff that goes on at the bottom of the period, you can effectively prevent what goes up to the top of like eventual sexual harassment and rape charges. Like that is what we truly want to stop, and starting at the bottom is the place to go.
Yeah, Never Dude in chat has a great thing here as well. I also suggest kindly calling out people when you hear sexist/racist words. Not cool, too far. I found most people won't use them if you call them out on it. Absolutely true. Yeah, basically it just takes one person saying, there's ways to do this differently, and this is something that we were going to talk about a little bit later, but let's do it now because Never Dude has, in a great way, linked it to what we were exactly talking about. There are ways to suggest people change their behavior that will cause them to get defensive. And if you are somebody who is trying to change somebody's behavior, you're going to want to stay away from those. So you don't want to say something like, hey, you are racist, when somebody says, or hey, you are sexist, when somebody says e-girl or whatever. Like that is going to cause somebody to have a thought process that's like, I'm not sexist, therefore the word I said wasn't sexist, therefore, and then, get into an argument that defends the word, right? When in fact, the way you want to be doing this is like, hey, I know you're not a sexist, so, using this term is something that I think we can agree, and you can come up with a way to convince them that aligns with the value that they want to be as well, right? Nobody wants to be a sexist, hopefully. And again, if they do.
What was it that you had written? You just like try to make sure that they're morally aligned with what the point that you're trying to make, and then try to translate that into a way that they will understand. I think that's what you had written.
Yes.
I think that is the perfect way of describing it. It's just like set like a moral standard first, and then explain why something could be hurtful and upsetting to them.
Just in general, and this is a life tip of mine that you're getting for free right now, and this applies to like literally everything. If you're ever trying to change somebody's mind on something or to get somebody to do something, you just don't get them defensive. Like when somebody becomes defensive, they will double down. All right, their views will become entrenched and more radical. So if you are somebody who is interested in scoring cool points or scoring points on like Twitter in a reply, if you're interested in having a pithy sounding turn of phrase, there are ways to do that will cause that reaction to people. But if your goal is to achieve change in somebody's actual behavior, the best way is to prevent them from becoming defensive. There's a lot of stuff that we've talked about today that's like stuff that I believe is 100% true. That's a personal opinion of mine with how to just deal with people and how to interact with human beings effectively.
Lead by example too. On top of that, just be a good example for the people around you. Say, I don't like this, and that's it. Sometimes, like if someone says a bad word, hey, I'd prefer if you didn't say that. And then they'll think about it over time because you didn't really attack them directly, but you told them your viewpoint on it, and then they'll actually consider your viewpoint most times and maybe change their behavior.
Yeah, I mean, if they're your friends, like they want to play with you, they want to do things that you agree with, and you have a power in this structure. You are not powerless here to somebody being. It's not just like, oh well, he says those words. There's nothing I can do about it. Like yes, there is. That is like exactly the kind of thing that being somebody's friend means that you are largely in charge of that. People are often a product of their environment in these cases, or if not a product, they're influenced by their environment, and you are part of their environment. So that is the move. Okay, so we have some further bullet points on here. Let's see. I think a lot of this we've actually already covered in some earlier discussion. So let me look down here. Okay.
There's just so many aspects of this that we want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on.
I think we can move on to this part here that you've added, Trell. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, actually. If you think that's sufficient, but what to do when you find yourself in a circle of people that are all making sexist or racist jokes.
Yeah, I have a short story about it, but when I was a really small streamer, I had 10 viewers. I was raiding in a guild, and there were more than one person in the guild saying off-color comments and sexist things, on stream. And so I individually had muted most of them. In hindsight, I think I should have taken it further and just gotten out of that situation completely. I don't think my actions actually changed their behavior because there were just too many of them. It was overpowering. That the more people do it, they think it's more acceptable to do it because others around them are doing the same thing. So what I should have done is just gotten myself out of there and been like, look, I'm not okay with this. I'm going to leave and find another group. And hopefully that would make a lasting impression on them, as well as getting myself out of that situation. It's hard.
I'm right there with you, Trell. I raided in a guild for a long time that was that made off-color jokes, had problems with harassment, just went after people that were unfairly prejudiced against for, God, I don't fucking know what reason. Just, I don't know, people being assholes on the internet. And it's in hindsight, that is not something that I want to be about, and that's not something that I would ever be a part of again. And it actually kind of tears me up thinking that I enabled it or helped it in some form or fashion by being complicit. And it's
right.
Yeah,
it's really rough. And it's because looking back, everybody has a moral obligation to not let shit like that happen. And it's just you have to be able to stand up for yourself, and you have to be able to stand up for those affected. And it's
it's really hard. And if you're somebody who has failed at doing this at some point in the past, we don't blame you. It's a difficult position to be in, but now's the time, right? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today.
Also, something that I want to point out is that people will a lot of times call for action of change, actionable change between a person's personality, and then not accept that actionable change in the future. And it's you can't have it both ways all the time. If you believe that a person is still that low and still that way, that's a major problem. But giving people the opportunity to change is also something that you have to be open-minded about, and understand that while people may have been away a certain way, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever, there is opportunity for them to change.
People can change negatively as well. I think it's worth taking a look around you every now and then in this game, or anywhere in life, but especially online where it's easy to not see someone's true personality. Take a look around you and think man, how has this person changed over the last few years? And I kind of found myself in that position and got out recently, and I feel like it was definitely the best choice. And luckily I'm in a position as a tank player where I kind of choose my group, which is a burden and a good thing, but I really try my hardest to surround myself with only good people, and I feel like everybody should do the same.
Yeah. Here's the little blurb I wrote about this, and I'm going to just kind of read it out because I think I worded it well. At some point, you're going to reach a decision point where you have to decide whether playing with those people and potentially the success that you're having with them in the game is worth being a part of that environment. And if you stay and they don't change for the better, which is a good thing to try and aim for, the odds are very strong that you will change for the worse. But, as I said there, people do change for the better, and the right person in the right place can do a world of difference, even to a whole guild here. So if that is a fight that you're willing to take on, that you don't have to leave an environment like that. But if you're not actively making it better, then it is making you worse. Okay. There's so much more bullet points on this. I think that I want to skip right to the end here, and I don't know. I don't want to go through all of the stuff that is written below here, but if there are specific points that I think that either of you would like to get to here, let's do that now. But I think that for the purposes of the message here today being effective, it's important that it is concise, and I don't want to run too much longer than an hour on this one for that reason, because I believe that will make it a little bit harder to get the message across. So
yeah, I just want to end on listen to people. If they're saying please stop or don't do that or anything like that, make sure that you're listening and understanding where they're coming from. Like really just try to be understanding, because I don't know, people aren't always the best at communicating their problems, but just try to listen.
I think for me, the biggest thing is that people can be two different people. Like they can be two different ways. They can be one way around their friends and one way around, like women in this case, but it can be just other groups of all kinds. And the fact that somebody is cool and reasonable around you does not negate evidence that they are not that way in other places and should not be used to discredit the latter, but rather, the fact that they are capable of being normal and reasonable in your situation means that you should hold them to that standard in all cases as well, because you know that you can expect better of them. So that is, I think, the biggest case going forward here for everybody involved, or not everybody involved, but everybody in the gaming community that has any kind of, situation like this develop ever, which I imagine is going to be pretty much everybody. All right, Trell, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that we missed that you would like to have your words on?
It's just good to be empathetic. Like take position with the victims, especially. Imagine how they feel. Reach out to them. I think it's good on the allegations that aren't concrete to realize that people's lives could be destroyed by things said on Twitter or any social media. Depending on, like, some people that are innocent could be really badly affected by some of these things, and you got to be careful about that. But if people are for sure guilty, then yes, they deserve it. I don't know. It's such a complicated situation. You just got to really think about things before you take action, but action is good.
All right. That's going to be it for us this week. As a podcast, we are going to be taking more action on this. There is a lot that we actually wrote for our show notes today that we didn't get to today, and we are going to be talking about this more. We are going to be an active force in this fight in our community, and to make sure that all the stuff that happened this week never happens again. As a podcast, that's stuff we're going to do. All three of us as individuals are also involved in those efforts. So follow us individually for those things, but as a podcast, we're united on this as well. We really hope everybody's doing okay. Again, reach out to us if you need to talk for pretty much any reason, and that is something that we would like to help with.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back next week with some WoW content probably, or I actually don't know for sure what we'll talk about next week, but we'll be back next week. Thanks everybody for hanging out.
Thanks, guys.
Later.